Good morning, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this panel discussion and to celebrate International Women's Day. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Yanling Wang, Associate Dean, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, for some opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. I am just so glad to be here celebrating International Women's Day with the most amazing group. And first, I would like to make an announcement. Carleton University acknowledges the location of its campus on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. In doing so, Carleton acknowledges it has a responsibility to the Algonquin people and a responsibility to adhere to the Algonquin protocols. It is absolutely an honor to open the distinguished panel featuring 4 accomplished women ambassadors who have excelled in their field of international diplomacy. Their presence tells us that women have gone a long way. For decades, the work of diplomacy was conducted by men. Things are changing, and we get to hear their insights on the changing landscape for women in international affairs. While we celebrate the remarkable progress, we also recognize there's a long way to go. And 2 days ago at a conference here with one paper trying to quantify women's empowerment in the global south, I was really struck in one indicator which tries to capture whether wife beating is justified. The justifications range from low income, child care, to even arguments with husband. So that reminded me of the slogan when I grew up in China. That slogan is, women can hold up half the sky. Indeed, across the globe, we could and we should. I know it takes time from women can hold up half the sky to women hold up half the sky. The key is how to get there. So today's panelists are great examples, and I want to thank them for taking the time to speak to our students and to celebrate International Women's Day on the Carleton campus. I so look forward to their unique perspectives on the challenges and opportunities in the foreign service as women leaders. At some point down the road, we can all say, women hold up half the sky. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang, for those inspiring remarks. I am Farwa Jamil, co-EDI rep at NPSIA.
And I'm Amiki Bista, an EDI committee member at NPSIA.
So before we delve into the panel, we would like to take a moment to introduce remarkable individuals who will be sharing their insights with us today. So first we have our incredible moderator, Dr. Valerie Percival. Valerie Percival is an associate professor at the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University and a commissioner with the Lancet Site Commission on Peace, Justice, and Gender Equality for Healthy Societies. Her current research focuses on 3 areas: the measurement and meaning of suffering of civilians in violent conflict and humanitarian emergencies, the complexity of engagement in health systems, and the promise and perils of policy networks. Prior to joining NPSIA, she held positions at the Canadian Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, as well as the International Crisis Group, where she was the director of the Kosovo office. She also worked with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Guinea and as well as the Peace Research Institute in Oslo. Valerie holds a doctorate in public health from London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, a master's degree from NPSIA, and an honors BA in Peace and Conflict Studies from the University of Toronto. Through her research and professional experiences, Valerie has experienced the difficulties of international engagement and conflict-affected states, the challenges of policy development, and the risks and rewards of interdisciplinary research. Next, we have our first panelist, Ms. Myca Magnolia Fischer, Minister and Deputy Head of Mission, Embassy of the Republic of Philippines in Canada. Myca Magnolia Fischer is currently Deputy Head of Mission at the Philippines Embassy in Ottawa, holding the rank of Minister. Ms. Fischer has an incredible career so far in the diplomatic field. Her first diplomatic posting was in Beijing, China, where she served as third, second, and eventually first Secretary in Council from 2006 to 2012. Her second posting was in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, from 2014 to 2020, where she served as First Secretary and then Minister and Consul General and Chargé d'Affaires in Manila. She was Special Assistant to Foreign Affairs Under Secretary for Policy and served in various capacities in the Office of Asia and Pacific Affairs. She was Deputy Assistant Secretary and Executive Director of ASPAC before taking her post as Deputy Head of Mission in the Philippines Embassy in Ottawa in March 2023. She holds a bachelor's degree in tourism from the University of Philippines in Diliman, and she likewise obtained a master's degree in international studies from the same university.
Next, we have Dr. Heather Cameron, retired diplomat and former High Commissioner to Ghana and Sierra Leone. Dr. Cameron is an alumni of Carleton University, receiving her BA in Political Science in 1987. She joined the Department of External Affairs and International Trade, Canada, in 1990. The majority of her career was spent at the Canadian International Development Agency, where she held a number of bilateral, regional, and corporate roles, including Director of Pan-African and La Francophone programs of the Human Development and Gender Equality Division, and as Senior Director of the Haiti Division. A 2-year mid-career break in the UK allowed her to be a visiting research fellow at the Institute of Development Studies at University of Sussex and to pursue a master's in public policy at King's College. In 2018, she was awarded a PhD in public policy studies at King's College London. Her overseas assignments include Zimbabwe in the mid-1990s, Mozambique in the mid-2000s, and as High Commissioner in Ghana from 2016 to 2019, with concurrent accreditation to Sierra Leone and as Ambassador of the Republic of Congo. In August 2023, Ambassador as Republic of Togo, my mistake. In August 2023, she completed a 4-year assignment as Consul General for Canada in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Dr. Cameron has recently retired from the public service after nearly 35 years. Next, we have Ambassador Beatriz Valle Marichal, Ambassador of Honduras to Canada. Ambassador Marichal has more than 20 years of experience supporting the public and private sectors. Recently, she was elected the most voted Honduras Congresswoman. She has been Vice Minister of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Honduras, Ambassador of Honduras in Canada, and she has been involved as co-founder of Libre, a political party in Honduras. She has also promoted several initiatives in law, economy, national security, and gender equality. And last but not least, we have Ms. Pinar Yapici, Counsellor at the Embassy of Turkey in Ottawa. Ms. Yapici has currently serving as Counsellor at the Embassy of Republic of Turkey in Ottawa, brings with her extensive experience in international relations. She began her diplomatic journey after graduating from Gazi University with a degree in international relations in 2003. From her early days as Third Secretary at the Deputy Directorate General of Maritime and Aviation Affairs, to her service in Bahrain, Second Secretary at the Turkish Embassy, and later as Vice Consul in Salzburg, Austria, Ms. Yapici has consistently demonstrated her dedication and proficiency in diplomatic affairs. Her journey continued as she took further roles as First Secretary, Head of Section at the Deputy Directorate General of Northeastern Mediterranean, and her service at the Permanent Delegation of Turkey to the European Union in Brussels, Belgium from 2014 to 2018. This then led her to assume leadership positions as the head of department at the Deputy Director General East Asia in 2018 to 2019, and subsequently as the head of department at the Deputy Directorate General of North Africa in 2019 to 2020. Since September 2020, she has been serving as counselor at the Embassy of the Republic of Turkey in Ottawa. As you can see, we have an incredible panel with us today, bringing together diverse experiences and perspectives. We are truly excited to hear everyone's valuable insights in this discussion, and with the wealth of experience and input, they bring promises of an engaging and enlightening discussion.
With that, I'd like to invite our panelists to the stage, and without further ado, I'm thrilled to hand it over to our moderator, Dr. Percival, to guide us through an enriching conversation. Dr. Percival, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be with everyone today, and thanks to people for taking time to join us. Today is really a day to celebrate the unbelievable successes of the fight for gender equality. And let's face it, we haven't achieved gender equality anywhere, including at NPSIA, without a fight. Gender equality means that all human beings, irrespective of sex or gender identity, should be free to develop their human capabilities, access economic and public sector resources, live in safety and security, and exercise agency and enjoy autonomy. When societies move towards gender equality, when women's equality advances, we all benefit. Societies are more peaceful and prosperous, and governance improves. So while today is a day to celebrate the successes in gender equality, it is also time to reflect and to take stock. The World Economic Forum releases a report, the Gender Gap Report, every year. And this year, it's estimated that it will take another 131 years for the world to achieve gender parity. So to reach gender parity, we need more investment and we need political will. We need to increase girls' participation in school, ensure women have access to training, to form the formal economy, ensure laws protect elements of their equality, build infrastructure, etc. But this investment will pay off. The World Economic Forum also tells us that if we close gaps in workforce participation in emerging markets, if we increase women's participation by just 5.9%, economies would grow by 8%. However, the fiscal space for investing in gender equality is shrinking. We know that budgets are constrained, and we also know that the increased geopolitical tensions are placing demands for increased military spending. So to talk through some of these issues, these easy issues, I'm very pleased to be joined by a distinguished panel to discuss their own experiences and share with you what they've learned, but also talk about how we can potentially accelerate progress towards gender equality. So I want to begin with some general opening questions. So you are all seasoned diplomats with very distinguished careers, and we're so pleased to have you here. Given that the topic of this year's International Women's Day is accelerating progress, investing in women, I just wanted to begin with kind of a tour de table, asking you to reflect on your experiences as diplomats. So what changed over the course of your career for female diplomats? What challenges did you face that women entering the diplomatic service today might not face? But what things have remained the same? What are those sticky problems that still exist for women trying to navigate the world of diplomacy? So I'll start maybe on my left with Mr. Cameron.
Well, good morning, everyone. Great to be here. And just you know, in my lifetime, my grandmother was banned from studying science at the University of Guelph. My mother had to quit the public service when she got married, and I was a married woman representing Canada as head of mission abroad. And so 3 generations, I often tell that story, especially in communities or countries overseas, because it really is about what kind of future do we want, and to recognize that a lot of change has already occurred, and of course the change still is needed and still is happening. And listening to the biographies, perhaps I entered the Foreign Service earlier than other colleagues and just retired, but what's changed certainly is the number of women in positions at all levels of the organization in Canada and at all levels overseas. I think it's far more common now to have many female colleagues around the table, whereas a junior officer in Southern Africa, that wasn't necessarily the case. I think it's also, I mean, a small thing, but just at a personal level. I think the Foreign Service has got much better at recognizing a variety of family configurations. And when I applied for my first posting, my assignment officer said, "Are you sure you just got married? Are you going to get pregnant? I don't want to have to bring you back." And that was the conversation he had as my career advisor for my professional development. And I was just like, you know, this is okay. We are committed to going overseas. But I don't think that kind of conversation happens so much now. And it is important that families be supportive and that an assignment abroad is something that families want to do together. But there's much more awareness of single parents going out, children staying behind, joining you, spouses staying behind, spousal employment. And in my lifetime too, or in my career, colleagues broke ground about being pregnant overseas and having mat leave overseas. And so some of those things that we take for granted here in the domestic context, it's been good to see the Foreign Service sort of adjust to that, because if you don't feel like you've got that enabling environment for your personal life as well as for your professional life, I think it's very difficult to go beyond for future assignments. So I'll stop maybe there.
Okay, excellent.
Just
yes,
a couple
we'll
of first
turn to-
thoughts. Yeah.
Hi, as you might have heard, I am the ambassador of Honduras. Honduras is an underdeveloped nation, and you might know that inequality in Honduras is bigger than in the rest of the countries. All issues of inequality impact women a lot more than they impact men, especially in my country. For example, in Honduras, abortion is prohibited. It doesn't matter if you're ill, it doesn't matter if you're gonna die, it doesn't matter if you were raped. You don't have a choice. Your choice is die of the disease that you're having if you cannot have an abortion, or have an abortion and go to jail. So dying or jail. So we are I think we are behind a lot of the countries. Honduras is, I think, one in 3 countries all over the world who does not have, we don't have that part of the women's rights. The pill was just approved the day after pill. And misoprostol, of course you could get it as contraband, and you find places where these ladies, and most of them are poor. Honduras has a 70% index of poverty, which is very, very high. That means 7 out of 10 people in Honduras are very poor. In my case, I think I have been lucky. I am a privileged person. I am white, and I was able to have a bilingual education, and then I had different jobs before I entered the service. I was directly appointed by the president, who was ousted in 2006, Manuel Zelaya Rosales. And getting into diplomacy wasn't that hard for me because I had been working through politics, and I got the appointment through politics. But then I started working here. I really enjoyed my time here. We did some work. We were finalizing the trade agreement with Canada. And it was a great experience for me. I stayed here the first time only for 2 years. It was from 2006 to 2008. And then our president was ousted through a coup, a violent coup. And then came the hard part, because we were against the coup, and it was a lot of people in the nation who were against the coup. So we started fighting, and it was a different fight, but always women, it always takes a toll on women more than it takes on men. Sorry guys, but it's true. And as long as we continue to forget about the importance that women have in the economic growth of a country and in every way. And I'm hearing that at your time you had to argue about having a family or having a professional life. That is so unfair, and that discussion shouldn't even happen. Nobody should have to tell you cannot have children, and then you can have both. You can have both. But I tell you, girls, it's harder for women everywhere. We live in a country that is machista, of course. Imagine Latin America, we are, also rancheras, and I do not want to perpetuate something that is going on, but it is going on in our countries. Machismo is very alive, and that guys don't like to be bossed around by women. And they try to get your place, so you have to work a lot harder than men to achieve positions in government. I was the most voted woman in history in this period. And there was a political, we said like I don't know how to say, but a political conflict within my own party. And I decided that I was going to come here to be an ambassador to Canada and really serve my country instead of staying there and just struggling and struggling and struggling being a woman. And a lot of men, they're jealous, and it's a tough road for women. Mm-hmm. And I wish that I could have gone further in my career as a politician, and of course as a diplomat now, because I have had now 3 important postings. And but I decided that I would take the diplomatic course where I can serve my country better. We have a long way to go, girls, and we have to stop fighting only for quotas and quotas. I don't believe in quotas. I believe that we could give women more support in terms of their children and having, like guarderías infantiles where they take care of your children while you work, because most women now that and in Honduras, a lot of them are abandoned by their husbands. So they have to take care of their children, they have to go out and work, and they don't have anybody to take care of their children because they're poor. They cannot pay for a nanny or somebody to take care of them. There's not enough kindergartens, so we have a lot of struggles, and we have a long way to go, especially in countries like mine, which is very underdeveloped, I'm sorry to say. And we think that we are moving forward with this government. I really, really hope so. They have tried to put an emphasis on the growth of women, but of course, as you were saying, it's a long way to go. Imagine in Canada, imagine the long way that Honduras has to walk through to achieve real equality.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we'll be reflecting a little bit more on the backlash against gender equality that we're seeing in Central America and other places in just a moment.
Oh, and my president is a woman, I forgot. Oh my God. Imagine in a machista country, that is a great achievement.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll turn to Ms. Fischer. I wonder if you could reflect on your diplomatic career and what's changed and what's sticky and stayed the same.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I've been in the Philippine Foreign Service for over 25 years, and I would think, well, the Philippines, first of all, is one of the most gender equal country in Asia. So I'm lucky in a way because we didn't have to struggle so much. So we didn't need to have quotas. In some countries, foreign service, they need to have a quota for their ambassadors, a quota for women. But we didn't have to do that. We have, even without a quota, we have a parity of women and men ambassadors in our foreign service. So, but it doesn't show how hard that the women ambassadors needed to work, so much harder than the men ambassadors, the male ambassadors. So when people ask people ask usually the women diplomats, how do you balance work-life balance, right? How do you do that? But they don't ask that of men diplomats. So because in our society, women are still expected to take care of the house, of the chore, of the childbearing, child rearing. So we always to be able to be successful in your career in the diplomatic service, you had to do, in addition, the work at home. So in our foreign service, women are either single or separated, and single not by choice. It's because they don't have men who are supportive of their career to be of their career. So I'm happily married, so I'm an exception to the rule, which is sad. So, but we're hoping that with more, actually it's not the laws, we have the legal framework, it's the norms, it's the societal thinking that needs to change, and we need to invest in that. And so, and later on maybe I can discuss what the key driver in the change in our government towards women empowerment later on. But in the foreign service, it is equal but harder for women. So that's and with solo parenting, this is in the 25 years I saw how at least this has moved forward. Before solo parent were given the benefits of a single person, the benefits, your financial benefits. So that means you don't get the benefits of having a child. So there was some move there. Now we're given the financial benefits of solo parents. And so what else? So if the, what do you call this? If the budget is the highest form of policy, then I'm proud to say that in the government, our government, we are mandated by law to allocate 5% of our budget to gender and development programs. So, so you mentioned the fiscal space. So with competing priorities and everything. So, but for us, we have to mainstream the gender and development programs, so it doesn't compete. So, so we are mandated. We are made to account for that 5% if we don't reach the 5% of our budget. So at least with that budget, we are able to increase awareness, increase education, and even engage media to change the societal norms and the mindset.
Yes, thank you, and we'll definitely get into a discussion of the key drivers within government, and also the importance of ring fencing budgets for gender equality. But just to turn to Ms. Yapici, if you have reflections in terms of how things have changed over the course of your foreign service career, and what things kind of stand out to you?
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be with you here on the Women's Day. I think our experiences, although we're coming from different countries, they're all very similar to me. In my experience, basically entering the foreign service, I think it's hard for everybody because the exams are highly competitive, and it's difficult for everybody, not just for women. The good thing, what has changed, is absolutely the number of female diplomats. This morning I was looking up for some numbers that I can use today, and I saw that, first of all, the Turkish Foreign Ministry, which I am a proud member, we have a very strong, encouraging and egalitarian approach in terms of employing women diplomats. For me, yes, the exams are always difficult, and it's encouraging to see more women. Looking at the figures, I saw that we have 82 women ambassadors around the world, Turkish ambassadors. We have a lot of consul generals, director generals. So what is important here, I think, is to see more women in decision-making processes and leading leadership positions. That's key. So the numbers are definitely increased, and I would like to very shortly say that there is a very strong feminist tradition in Türkiye. I mean, the Turkish women were granted a right to vote and run for office back in the 1930s, with the huge and sweeping reforms of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, our leader and founder. Again, back in 1990s, we had a woman prime minister, can be around the same time with Canada, I guess, in early 1990s. We had a female woman chair of the Constitutional Court in Turkey. We have the first fighter pilot, Mrs. Sabiha Gökçen. The second largest airport in Istanbul is named after her. So there are lots of examples, and it's good to see. It's very encouraging to see that the numbers are increasing. The second thing that has changed, this is not specific for women, I think, but in my experience, what has changed is the speed of communication technologies. I think it transformed our lives, and it's still shaping our lives. I mean, we used to say, I mean, you have to be up to date to follow the developments. Now we have to be up to minute. So I think it's a big challenge, not specific to women, but for all of us, I think.
I think that it would have an extra burden on women who have children at home.
Exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that when you're a young, single, professional woman, you're able to work long hours and compete on a level playing field. But as soon as those childcare responsibilities come in, it can change your ability to be able to be up to the minute and to respond to those messages. I always thought that the BlackBerry, which was a Canadian invention, was terrible for gender equality. So let's turn to now talking a little bit more about what's happening in the world today. And we know that while we've seen tremendous progress towards women's equality, it's not straightforward and it's not guaranteed, and we do see rollbacks in some places of the world. So while we can celebrate France enshrining the right to abortion within its constitution, we're also witnessing a very well-funded and extremely organized backlash against women's equality in many countries, including efforts to roll back sexual and reproductive health and rights. And so just continuing our tour de table, I'd like to ask for your reflections on this backlash, and if possible, reflecting on your own experiences either at home or in diplomatic postings, in terms of what do you think is driving this backlash against women's equality and gender equality? And do you think we're doing a good job of preventing, mitigating, managing that backlash? Or what strategies do you think that we should employ? So I'll start with Ms. Fischer, because you wanted to talk about your government.
Oh, yeah. Well, primarily about 15 years ago, we enacted the Magna Carta of women. So it affected all of society, and it has improved. It has improved the situation of women, and basically it needs the change needs to be done by the whole of society. It cannot just be the government. Mm-hmm. So with this Magna Carta, it empowered the all sectors of society, empowered, encouraged, even mandated all sectors of society to work towards women empowerment and equality. So, and I mentioned the 5%, but this is just for the government, the 5% budget. So that's very helpful. So the companies would also need to follow suit. The private companies would need to invest in such programs as well. But so it's improving. If, at least for my country, I cannot really think of a backlash. It's opening up slowly. So we're probably one of the countries that don't have divorce in the world, but there are sectors of society, especially, who are not stopping and continuing to fight for this right. So there is progress, and so but it's just steady but surely it's happening.
Just in terms of the issue of divorce, one of the reasons, just for the students in the room, one of the reasons why divorce is so important to be enshrined as a legal right is if a woman leaves her husband without having a legal right to divorce, it means that they're not able to secure the assets that have accrued during during their marriage and recognized for the work that they've done. And statistics everywhere show that divorce is bad for women. It's worse for women than it is for men in terms of the financial hit that women take. But particularly in countries, if you don't have the legal right to divorce, it can be really challenging to leave, to be able to get any of those family assets. So I'm sure you have things to say about the backlash against gender equality that we're seeing in many places. I wondered if you wanted to reflect on what strategies do you think work best to try and push back against
Well, in Honduras, the cultural issues, as she was saying, are changing the mindset of people. I think is one of the hardest processes that we can face as societies. And for example, abortion, and we have a lot of religious groups in Honduras, evangelists and Catholics, and more evangelists than Catholics. We used to be more Catholic, but religion has a very, very high impact on the backlash towards women's rights. Sadly, because I support people who go to their churches and who like to worship and feel comforted by religion. But in terms of women's rights, I think religion hasn't helped. It has done the opposite. For example, today I was watching in France when they were incorporating abortion to their constitution, which is personally for me is a motive of celebration. In Honduras, they rape a woman, I think every 16 hours, or even more, I think. And probably my statistics are off. But the important thing is that all these women are poor. And I think that these issues and backlash also have their origin in the inequality. Like it's a class issue as well. Like rich women in Honduras who want to get an abortion, they just go to their doctor, and the doctor would probably say, I'm going to take out your bladder, but actually they're having an abortion. But then poor women, they have to go to unsafe places and have their abortions, and there's lots of deaths, infections, and whatnot. So that is really sad. And of course, men, there's backlash from men who want to control our bodies. It's not that we are in favor of abortion per se. We are in favor of choice. Is the fact that women, we should be able to have a choice and determine. Like some raped women and who get pregnant choose to have this baby. And I think that's something that is very commendable. But there are others who would feel violated again or raped again if they had that child that would remind them of their attacker, right? Well, in Honduras, the problem is choice. And we have mostly men making laws in Congress. And it's like 15% women and the rest are all men. And men are constantly, and they keep making decisions for us, women. And I think it's a power issue, a control issue, and we're fighting hard, and men don't like women, and in my country they don't like women telling them what to do, or it's tough.
I think that's a universal. I think that
They
is
feel like,
something global. Men don't like women who tell them what
Yeah,
to
like
do.
uncomfortable for them. I don't know. It's cultural. Like, it's anthropology.
No, for sure, absolutely. I think on the issue of unsafe abortions, when I was in Mozambique, in Maputo Central Hospital, they did a study, and 30% of maternal mortality was because of unsafe abortion. So you can see the incredible toll that takes on maternal health. Ms. Yapici, would you like to comment on your experiences in terms of seeing backlash either at home or in places that you've been posted abroad, and what do you think are some of the best strategies to be able to manage that?
Again, I think it's a matter of mentality, the political culture. I mean, when we look back again to history, the women's rights, the progress in women's rights have always been in tandem with political and social life and developments. In Türkiye, I mean, I don't know the details, the technical details, but abortion is legal as far as I know. But one of the most important topics that we try to pay attention, the government is paying attention and to prevent, is violence against women. And this topic, this violence against women, is irrespective of the political, social, or economic background. It affects most of the women in Turkey, and most women want to hide it. Most educated, let's say, with strong backgrounds, businesswomen, with strong professions, they don't maybe show it. Maybe we see that it's an issue for rural areas, but it's not. It's unfortunately very common. And we're trying to deal with it. I think what is important is to educate young girls and also young men about their roles in society, because there is a kind of conditioning at the beginning. These roles are for girls. Girls have to behave like this, and boys should prepare themselves to be men. I think it has a very strong psychological dimension as well. Our social roles and roles in the later days in our lives. I think it's important. I mean, it's part of how you approach basic human rights. Again, you cannot separate women's rights from individual liberties. How you approach inclusivity, diversity, universal fundamental rights. This is part of this bigger picture, I think.
Yeah, no, thank you. Heather, did you have something that you wanted to add on backlash? It's such an easy topic.
It's such an easy topic, and actually, one of the boxes I've unpacked, I'm unpacking coming home, and one of the books that came out was Backlash by Susan Faludi, and she wrote that the undeclared war against American women in the early 90s, and it is at the top of my to-read pile, just to go back and see, 30 years later, how her analysis and how things have changed. And so for any of you that are interested in the issue and haven't read the book, I would encourage you
She did an updated edition that just came out a couple of years ago.
Oh, did she?
Yes,
Great, okay.
So,
but in terms of the backlash, I agree with some of the comments in terms of the coordination, the importance of civic education, and to really look at this through a rights lens. Perhaps I would contribute a different dimension, which is about domestic versus international. And certainly in a number of Western countries, what I would perceive we're seeing is we can't make these issues real in the domestic context, but we can fight them internationally. And so whereas things like reproductive rights are established not only by policy, but by Canada's Charter of Rights or other documents in other countries, if you can't make that ground in Canada, then it becomes an easy issue to say, well, why is our international aid doing reproductive health? Or why are we not respecting the laws of those countries? I think rights are rights, and what we all want to be doing as diplomats is realizing rights for citizens, and the role of things like benchmarking and normative developments are really important because they give tools for policymakers, for diplomats, for civic actors, other citizens in countries to take court cases forward and so forth. But right now, I think we're seeing some of these reproductive health rights being played as a wedge issue internationally, separate from the domestic context. And I think it's important that we think about that, because then what are perhaps other issues where we'll see a gap between the domestic reality and what the policies are overseas.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to turn now to individual questions, and I'm going to take about 10 to 15 minutes more because we were late starting, if that's okay. So Turkey is such an incredibly important country in both Europe and the Middle East. It straddles both areas in a challenging way. It's a challenging position to be in. The Middle East is really a particularly a difficult region at this moment, and it's challenging to promote gender equality within that because of a conservative backlash against gender equality. So I just wondered, from your experience, what do you think are the best approaches to be able to advance women's equality in countries in the Middle East? And what advice would you give to our young aspiring diplomats in the audience about how they can promote gender equality and women's rights in countries that might have that kind of conservative tradition?
Well, my first post was Bahrain, and to be honest, I'm not an expert on Middle East, because when we talk about Middle East, that word itself, Middle East, it's not a one single homogeneous block. It consists of very, different countries with different social, economic developments, with their, unique characteristics, backgrounds, etc. So each country has its own unique characteristics and history and background. This is the case. But at the same time, there are universal values that we all share and we all aspire to reach. I think it's a combination of both. And from my experience, I think nobody likes to be lectured. I think this is key. And I think, it should be a combination of, not only top-down approaches, but bottom-up, approaches too. It should be a combination of both, because these changes don't happen overnight. When we look at the history of women's rights development in Europe, in the Western world, in Türkiye, it's all a long process. It's a combination of mentality, your economic situation, your culture, your political culture. So I wouldn't have an advice on this, because there's no easy solution. Again, it's a very long process, but in my view, it should be a combination of both, taking into account the characteristics of that country, the society, the reality on the ground, and the universal values and common, ideals that we want to achieve.
Okay, that's excellent advice. So next to the Philippines. So you've described the Philippines, and it's described in the literature as well, as one of the most gender equal countries in Asia. It scores extremely well on educational attainment, on health and survival, but in the informal sector, there's a significant number of women that are working that are still struggling to gain pay and benefits. I just wondered, what lessons do you think the Philippines offers other countries in terms of their efforts to promote gender equality? What do you think has gone well? And then what do you think other countries might want to focus on to avoid this kind of gap of the informal sector and women lacking benefits?
Yeah, so primarily I think the women are not joining the workforce primarily because of the societal responsibilities that they're expected to do. So if we could provide opportunities for them for men to share in the burden of caring for the house, for the home, for the children, then the women has it easier and will be more encouraged to join the workforce. So there's a joke that I used to say all the time, behind every successful man is an exhausted woman. I used to, but then after thinking about it, I realized, why? Why do we have to be behind the scene? Why can't women be the successful ones, right? And I think it's really, when I used to say that, I thought it was like an acknowledgement of women's contribution. But it just goes to show how my mindset evolved and changed, and it could be changed, it could be improved, it could be made aware, so more aware. So I have hope for my country,
Of course, you should.
and great hope actually. So in me, I saw how I have not just to support the boss, but also be the boss. And so informal sectors, it's really, there's no, what do you call it, systemic or no law preventing you to be employed, or there's no, it is really the mindset, it's the societal expectations of women. And so I think this is what's, that's the biggest hurdle. And if you enable, like, for even before the pandemic, I envy some of the foreign service, other foreign service. They have the why, if not, why not? If in their in their posting, if, for example, you will be forced to be separated from your husband because you cannot, your husband cannot join you or something like that. So, but the if not, why not concept, I think it's the Australian Foreign Service has this, it's also just new. Basically, the establishment has to explain why you cannot be given this role, or it is, the burden is on the institution, not to explain. So I think that's, and then there's the Korean example. I think they have like 7 years of like maternity leave or something. No, they can take, it's just amazing that they can take the leave without, I mean, their job is secure because, so, but I don't want to be a spokesperson of other countries, but, but it's just to say that the Philippines has, has some way to go, is improving, but I think we're on the right track. And one of the ways really is to change the mindset and enable the women to do to realize the potential that they have. So even the simple having like a daycare in your office, or the daycare in your husband's office.
That would be better.
That would be better, right? So not just daycare where the women works. And I think that's very, very simple, very basic. And because if it's just, if you say, okay, in the Philippines, it's easy to hire domestic help, right? But this only reinforces gender inequality with the income inequality, right? So, very simple, enable women to do what they know best. So, and that way we don't have to be in the back of, behind the successful man and be successful ourselves.
I think just to underscore the importance of access to childcare, there's so many studies in multiple contexts around the world that show how access to affordable childcare is a great equalizer. And it's not only a great equalizer for women, but it's also a great equalizer for children, because they get access to early childhood education at an early stage of life. And so when governments acknowledge that, they're really creating an enabling environment to tackle all kinds of inequalities. So yeah, it's a very good point. Talking about caregiving approaches to women's equality, we tend to focus on women in leadership positions, right? In politics, in diplomacy, in the private sector. And studies have shown that while we clearly need to pay attention to who occupies the C-suite, as they say, we also need, for gender equal societies, we need to focus on people who are working on the front lines, including the front lines of care. So, and those individuals working on the front lines are disproportionately female. So I wondered how you think the international community can better work collaboratively to recognize, value, and support the work of women's care globally.
Well, you know, I was thinking while the guests were speaking, their guests, I realized that women, we entered the professional world, and we changed our mindset. We wanted to have children and we wanted to work. But men have moved really slow in that terms. It has been difficult for men to adjust to this new situation. It's not that new, but it's been slow. And I think it has been very hard for them to adjust to the fact that women work. And so they haven't stood up to the responsibilities of family. And I think that is a big problem. And I was going to add that I have seen a lot of liberal politicians everywhere promise women's rights when they are campaigning. And it happened in my country. Of course, a woman president, they said that they were going to support women's rights and blah, 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 and abortion even for the 3 causes, which would be a big step in my country. And you realize that when they go into power, they face huge obstacles. And one of them, internationally, for example, is Trump with Roe versus Wade, for example. That was a huge hit for all women all over the world, because it empowers men or people who are against women's rights, and a lot of women are against their own rights, which is astounding. But it sends just the wrong message. Countries with leaderships like Canada, the United States, France, Germany, I think they could be, some of them, of course, are sending the right message, but the United States, for example, which we are very close to, and we receive a lot of influence from the United States, it was a huge blow. It is a huge blow. So, and inside, in my heart, I am celebrating France. But then here, close by, women are being deprived of their rights that they had acquired with great effort. So I find that women's rights we have to be constantly fighting for them. You move a step ahead and then 2 steps back, and then 1 step ahead, or 3 steps ahead and then 2 steps back. And that is how it is playing, and I think that's why it is so slow. And I think the international community, we should be able, but it's going to be hard, but we should be able to reach agreements and conventions that will support women's rights all over the world in countries who would sign these international agreements. But I think that we are a long way for that. I don't want to be negative, but I have seen what has been happening to women's rights, and that is exactly what is happening. You know, in 1982, abortion was, you could have an abortion for different reasons. And imagine we are in 2023 and abortion is just banned totally. So it's just this constant battle to regain what we had gained before, or new things that are coming along. And so I think that in the measure that women come into leadership positions, women who support women's rights, maybe we can finally gather together and get the countries to sign these human rights, because it's not just women, it's women's rights. We are people who would like to make choices, to have choices, and to have opportunities. And I think that maybe, I hope it will happen soon, but with presidents that are looking backwards and that they speak sorely of women, and they keep maintaining those old cliches, or they're not even cliches, because cliches are real. They're just like you get cornered into this spot where they put you there, and all women are here, and with this negative in a negative light.
Yeah.
And we have to work so much harder because of the family and because of the job and being denied women's rights and talking about divorce. I have had a successful career. I started in the private sector, but I am divorced. And it has been really hard for me to have a true personal new life. It's hard. I divorced the first time because my husband wouldn't support me. I supported him through his career so he could advance. And then when it was my turn, he said, no, why are you gonna work? No. And he really got angry. He didn't want to give me the opportunity, and so I left. But that takes a toll. I have a child. And even if you do it the best way possible, it takes a toll on your children as well. So we really need to work on making campaigns for making people aware, men aware of what is going on, of all the struggles that we have, so they can jump on the boat as well. Sometimes women's feminists, and they just push men away. Like, no, you are not our allies, you are men, you cannot be our allies. But I think that it's very important to bring men into the conversation and make them understand all the trials and tribulations we have to go through to have a good position, a leadership position. It's not like I'm a secretary that would work from 8 to 5. Sometimes I would have to go work on weekends and emergencies, and I had no control over that. I had to keep my job, and I wanted to grow as a professional woman. So I think bringing men would be very important so they can help us, because a lot of men are in leadership positions more than women still, because we're not 50-50 yet, not even close. So I think bringing men into the conversation would be a very good thing that we could do, and make them understand really with patience and love and tolerance, because I guess it must be hard for guys to adjust themselves to this new woman that surfaced about 50 years ago or something like that, 60 years, I don't know. So it's fairly new. If we talk in terms of history, it's fairly.
It's interesting that you should bring up men, because there's a scholar with the Brookings Institute who wrote this really great book called The Boys and Men. His name is Richard Reeves, and one of the things that I think in the women's movement we tend to do, as you said, is we focus, because we've had to be a very tight movement with strong in-group, out-group boundaries. We don't tend to really reflect sufficiently on what is happening to men, right? And how it's not just the impact of gender equality, but the impact of it, the deindustrialization, and those kinds of factors have consequences for society and for the economy that I think we could be better attuned to. So I would second that. Yeah. So finally, we can't leave the conversation without talking about Canada's feminist foreign policy and Canada's feminist international assistance policy. So this placed the push for gender equality really at the heart of Canada's engagement internationally. So some supporters have really praised the importance of feminist approaches to promote the necessary transformation of gender norms, which we know are sticky and hold back progress on gender equality. Some skeptics suggest that perhaps a quieter approach that focuses kind of on the nuts and bolts of women's equality, education, health, labor force participation, without the label feminist, might be more accepted and perhaps more successful in some contexts. So I wondered if you could reflect on your experience as a Canadian diplomat. What were some of the successes that you saw of Canada's feminist foreign policy and feminist international assistance policy? And then what were some of the setbacks, or, failure is a big word, but what were some of the setbacks or the challenges that you encountered?
I was thinking about this last night, because it's really a question about, policy implementation, right? And how do policies get evaluated? And when, and what are the kind of measures of success? And I think that there have been a number of successes, and so many of them contextual. And I think one of the challenges is going to be to capture this, but just conversations that I saw happening in northern Ghana about the role of men and how women's empowerment it's not necessarily a zero-sum game, but it is about having some better outcomes for the families, unleashing new talents within the family, creating new resources for the family, and some great conversations, and men speaking about how proud they are of their wives who had learned to drive a motorbike or whatever, and something that wasn't traditional. And so I think absolutely that change piece in the communications around why is gender equality important, and what does it really mean in that context, and what are the opportunities, I think is an area that we all need to continue to invest in. And we need to find language that is simple, that is easy to understand in context, and shows why this matters. I think now as sort of a Canadian women who have grown up in a relatively advantaged society from an equality perspective, we have a long way to go, but we're way better than many other contexts, right? It is something to walk back into a country where that is not the norm. And it makes you realize very much how privileged we are to have the opportunities that we do. And there is so much that we can learn for countries where women's rights are less realized, from advocates and others about how those fights are moving forward. And so I think the learning has to go both ways. And for the feminist policy, I think that's something that we really need to be conscious of. Maybe what's not talked about so much in terms of the feminist policy, but what's really struck me is just, wow, when this came in, everybody went, oh, and it created, that's what the gender equality team at CETA used to do, or gender mainstreaming, and there was just a huge learning curve, but also there was a huge mobilization of resources and talent and expertise across the department and across the government to sort of bring this feminist perspective to issues that maybe we hadn't tackled before, because we were focused more in developing countries than others, and you're having new conversations. I think it's created a lot of partnerships globally and locally, and it's created new networks for Canada. And I think that there's been a number of individual initiatives, whether they're funded or just simply initiatives of effort that have made a difference, and most recently in Brazil. I mean, here's Canada and Brazil, two of the largest mining countries in the world. And we've got the women in mining networks working together in both countries, creating phenomenal economic opportunities for women. Talking about how do you make workplaces in remote mining locations safe for women, and that's safe for everybody, right? And so, just a small example, but that those are the kind of things that I think have been catalyzed by diplomats internalizing a policy and then thinking about how to make it relevant in the political economy and in the social context where they are. And one last thing I think what I've liked to have seen us do more of is maybe to focus more on in countries around building up local capacity for legal reform. And if you think about Canada, you think about South Africa, how did we get a lot of our equality provisions? It was through legal advocacy, LEAF, the Challenge Fund that funded constitutional challenges in order to develop the country here in Canada or develop in South Africa. And I think continuing to work for local legal change is really important, because so much of what happens is enabled or restricted by legal frameworks, whether you can engage directly or not as an advocate. Just removing those barriers or enabling something creates opportunities for women that are unimaginable. And I think particularly some of the work that we've done in the past around land tenure is significant. We've spoken about divorce and we've spoken about the care economy, but I think access to land and land rights is one of the very big pieces where there's still work to be done.
Absolutely, yeah. Law is a really key part of that gender equality scaffolding. And when I was working on HIV issues, we funded the HIV/AIDS Legal Network, which had phenomenal success around the world. They would send in legal experts that would go into countries and support domestic advocates in navigating their constitutions or their legal frameworks and working with parliamentarians to suggest reforms to that. So I think that that's an excellent idea.
But we have people that are funding legal advocates the other way,
Yeah.
that are funding for more restrictions.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. So just to wrap up, I have a final round of one question, I guess, and I'll combine both questions into one. If you were looking back at your younger self, what advice would you give yourself? This is for the benefit of the audience. And then I also wondered if you could provide, I'm going to pull an Ezra Klein and ask if you could provide a book suggestion or something that has really been important to you in terms of reading that could help young people here navigate either the world of international affairs or the world of international gender equality. So I'll start with you. Please go ahead.
That's a very good question. Questions. I think I would tell to myself, first of all, don't be afraid of making mistakes. There is characteristics, again, future especially, I think it can be the weak side of women. We want to do everything perfectly. But as I saw, during my career, perfection is definitely, it's an illusion. It doesn't exist. So rather than trying to be perfect and overwhelming us, even in the slightest mistake, I would, advise myself, my younger self, to be more flexible, not being a perfectionist, just learn how to be comfortable in uncertainty. I think this is a very important element, because we talked about, difficult examinations, highly competitive examinations, but when you actively start working in this field, you see that personal traits, it's highly important. We have to balance the two. So I think, we shouldn't be afraid of making mistakes. We have to be comfortable with uncertainties. It's good to have principles, but we should learn how to be flexible and problem solvers as well. And learning from our superiors is important. Learning from other people, not being prejudiced towards people. And sometimes, this is my unofficial advice, both to myself, not paying attention to what other people say is also important.
Excellent advice. What would you tell your younger self?
Well, it's not really related strictly to women, gender equality, but in life in general, I would like to tell my younger self to remain teachable, be open to new ideas, be flexible, as my colleague mentioned, because sometimes when you're young, you're idealistic, you think you know everything, but and as you grow, you realize you don't know much. So we have to be humble enough to be open to new ideas, question your bias, and be open. That's what I would like to say. For the book, well, actually, I forgot to mention, we have International Women's Day, but in the Philippines, we celebrate National Women's Month. It's a whole month of March. So for National Women's Month, I decided to read the book of a biography of Angela Merkel. So I've only read like a few chapters of it. It's amazing. So I forgot the title, but there are many great lessons to learn from her life, many sacrifices she had to give as well. But I think it was all the better. The world is much better because she was president she was chancellor, so of Germany. So that's a book that we can all try to read in the future. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Any advice for your younger self or a book?
Well, yes, it's sort of exactly, well, more or less what you were saying. that we should never stop learning. It's true that when you're young, you feel like you acquired knowledge when you get your degree or your master's degree, and then you feel that. And then you go out into the world and feel a little, like you start realizing that there is a lot to learn. Well, I'm almost 60, and I think that now I don't consider myself like a person who has a lot of knowledge, but that I need to get a lot more knowledge. So the more I know I don't know. Yeah. Which is, I think it's true for everyone, but we have to be exactly humble enough to accept that. And I promise you that if you stay learning, you will never get old. Also, it is important to talk to each other and be tolerant and exactly and review inside yourselves your own biases. Like my daughter has helped me do that a lot, and I am very grateful. And so I would tell my younger self, you can have a family, you can have a job, and you have to continue to learn, and of course you have to work hard, but don't make your lives just work. Your work is not your life, and it is important that you visualize it that way, so you become very integral individuals and women, we can achieve it. It's not like this guy Yao saying it's not so far. It's something that can be done. And each one of you, when you go to your job, you are door openers. I consider myself a door opener. I have been, pushing on walls and everything, trying to make opportunities for all these women that come behind me who are going to struggle as well. So each one of you in your own jobs, in your own professions, doesn't matter which one, you can be door openers for the future generations that are coming, that are going to have a struggle as well, because we are a long way from gender equality. So that is my humble advice to you guys.
Excellent advice. Would you like to conclude?
I would tell my younger self to stop and enjoy the moment more. I mean, I look back now and I think some really extraordinary things, and I didn't stop. That pressure, you have to work harder than your male colleagues, especially as a junior female employee, to prove that you can be there. Put too much pressure on myself too early, and I could have taken that window to do it. I did. I took a mid-career break. I accompanied my husband to him going to England. That was the best thing I did, and I just danced around the apartment one day when I realized I had no meetings and nothing to do. But I went back to school and really took a very different direction in the second half of my career, because I stopped and did that for myself. And so as you go forward, I think I was too caught up on you must succeed, you must reach EX, you must become a manager, all of those kind of things. Whereas really, you don't have to do it at the same speed as everybody else. You need to do it at the same speed for you and for your family, and don't be tied in by that. I think the environment is much different now. You see many more people doing that, taking breaks for family or other reasons, going back to school. I think those expectations have changed, but I think it's still important to keep that in mind. In terms of something to read, I would recommend Deborah Stone, Causal Stories. And for any of you that are interested in policy and how policy is communicated, I think that is, it made her career. And once you've read it, you can't not hear those stories that are being told. And she talks about policy stories and how political leaders talk about decline and threat and risk. And you see those stories being told, particularly in the gender equality area. And the environmental agenda Salisbury 72, one of the original ones that really just talked about how do issues get onto a policy agenda, and really well written, easy to read, and I think those are two articles that have stayed with me and I've often thought about as I go through work day to day.
Super, thank you very much.
Causal stories, I mean, really, it's awesome. Yeah,
Deborah Stone, right?
Deborah Stone.
Yeah, because I haven't read that book.
Well, thank you all very much for taking the time to share your experiences with our students and to celebrate International Women's Day here at Carleton. I believe that we have a reception now. Did you want to come up and make any closing remarks, or should I just direct people to the, okay, excellent.
No
So-
questions from the students?
Oh, did we want to have a Q&A for the students? Okay. Any questions from the students? Sorry.
No questions?
There's a hand in the back down here.
Yes, okay, excellent.
Oh, just one second.
Okay. I think I'm loud enough, and I'll be shaking. Okay, just because we have a recording. Okay, I'll try to hold the mic as stable as possible. The issue of women's rights is quite close to me because I'm from Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is unfortunately a country where women are completely banned from any type of education. And I may sound a little very emotional, but I'm very sad that the issue has not been mentioned once in the table today. Because if we're considering gender or women's right, it has to be inclusive. It has to include the women who are suffering, who are not in the table today, and who are in Afghanistan completely abandoned from their basic human rights. I have a question now from the panel is, I appreciate that Canada has done a lot for the immigration. I appreciate Turkey being one of not very close borders, but also somewhat close where a lot of Afghans go. But I want to know, since Afghan women has no access to even they can't go to hospitals, they can't go to doctors, nothing. What kind of advice would you give, or what is the way that each of honorable countries that are represented, do they have any approach for this? Is there any policy that they are planning to take, or any actions that they want to help? Because even funds going into Afghanistan are blocked, or they cannot directly reach the woman there and source. Either they has to be through international organizations or things like that, but it's really completely abandoned. So I want to know what are the ways. I understand Canada brought 47,000 immigrants from Afghanistan, and I appreciate that highly. But I want to know what's the way forward to it. Thank you.
So does anybody want to take that question? So just basically, Afghanistan is one of those case studies where we've seen not just a rollback, but it's almost like a tsunami has hit gender rights, right? Where women are not able to go to school, access to healthcare is difficult. Though I work in public health, and so I have a close friend who's been to Afghanistan and has talked about the resilience of Afghan community health workers in particular, and their incredible bravery in sustaining some degree of health services. But the question is, what's going to happen as people aren't getting trained, as women aren't getting trained and being able to enter the system? So any comments on what we would do, what public policy or international advocacy can do in a situation like Afghanistan, where you just, not only, women's rights are deeply, deeply political, they've become very synonymous with the West, I would say, as part of the international effort to assist Afghanistan after the first fall of the Taliban. What's the way forward from your experience and expertise?
Wow, that is a really, really tough question. And thank you, because it has me thinking, and I cannot even imagine. Because even my country, which is really, set back, girls can go to school.
It's been 900 days they're completely abandoned from even going first grade. I feel very privileged being here, honestly, and I don't feel very good. But
Did you want to?
Yeah, I would like to say a few words on behalf of my country. Afghanistan and Türkiye, we have very strong historic bonds, relations, And maybe you know the founder of Republic of Türkiye, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, had a very close relationship and very close bond with Mr. Amanullah Khan. And as far as I know, I'm not an expert on Afghanistan and I have never been to your country, but I know that he wanted to implement similar reforms in your country. I know that. What I can say now is, of course, you touched upon a very important and a real subject. I know that the international community or Türkiye, everybody is trying to give the right messages. I don't think that the international community has forgotten the women and young women in Afghanistan and the children, of course. What I can say is that our embassy in Kabul is open. Maybe it's one of the few countries in the world. And when we were in Afghanistan, all our embassies, our diplomats, they had worked for the social and economic development. They put a special emphasis on that. I don't have a quick answer to your question, but what I can say on behalf of Türkiye is that it's a very important country for us, historically, regionally. I know that there are lots of, refugees and other people who came from Afghanistan. I think what is important is that the international community does not forget what's happening in the country and give the right messages. But again, as I say, Turkish embassy in Afghanistan is still open and functioning there.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any reflections on this question?
I have not worked in that region. I've never been to Afghanistan, and thank you for bringing it back. So I'm hesitant to kind of comment, but I think, for myself, what are some of the relevant prior situations that could be helpful in terms of finding a way forward? And I don't think it's going to be finding a way forward through international public policy. I think it's going to be finding a way forward, as it often is in many post-conflict or conflictual situations, of quiet conversations. And so how do you prepare, and what are the opening points? Who are those influencers? How can those be reached? But also then to, like I know that we've been working very hard in a number of areas around refugee education. And I think of, the Mozambicans that came back at the time of peace, who came back from Malawi and Zimbabwe with more education, and a country that had not even had, enough years before the war started to fully establish its own education system. And so how do you prepare for the future? And how do you find the influencer points? And then when the openings are there, how can you support the locals to bring those forward, including community health workers and community teachers? So very modest first thoughts to a tough question and an important one.
It's quite interesting because I was born in Afghanistan, by the way, but been living in Canada for a long time. So my question is really about this sort of political polarization that's happening, and I don't want to put it in decades or whatever, but generally globally we're thinking about there's a political polarization, political ideology polarization. And I want you to think about how you situate women and gender equality that we're hoping to achieve within the context of this polarization that we see taking place. And then you can, I don't want to provide examples, I'm just asking your opinion about that. Thank you.
So how gender equality is framed, I guess, in that political polarization and how it's impacted by that. Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. Would you like to?
Maybe a little insight. Polarization is not, this huge polarization is not good. A little bit of polarization in politics is good because we cannot all think the same, right? But the extremes that we have gone through, they are terrible, and I think that they are terrible for equality as well. And I think it has to do with our leaders now speaking their most outrageous thoughts and just saying them and giving permission to others to be bigots, to be discriminative, to say the most outrageous things about others. And that didn't used to happen. And it's happening also in the diplomatic community, which is very sad because talking, dialogue is always the way to go. And all the other things that are happening, this polarization, people fighting and social media, attacking women, it has really, I think, affected, yes, women's equality as well. There are. Look at what the United States is, since it's such a huge country, it's such a huge influence. You can see there what's going on. They're against people from other countries. They're against women's rights. They're against, and people fight over that. They kill themselves. And I think it has to do a lot with the leaders who feel that they can say whatever outrageous thought that comes through their mind instead of keeping it to themselves, so others don't follow in that. We used to be more respectful of others, and now this respect through social media and everything, and there is no respect there. People just, and you offend and everything. And another thing that I don't think that is good, which is the other side, is that we have become very delicate on certain issues that shouldn't be delicate. Like we're not allowed to make any jokes, and of course I'm not talking about making fun about any specific person, but I think we have taken things to this extreme in the cancellation issues. You can cancel this cancellation.
Cancel culture.
This cancel culture. I don't think that it will benefit anyone either. I think we need societies to be tolerant, to be able to speak to everyone, because we all have different thoughts. And when we attack each other's thoughts, we are attacking each other's most fundamental right, which is thinking. And so I think that it impacts very negatively on women.
Anyone else want to? I'll just one comment on that. I think that we know that populist leaders use grievance as a mobilizing tool. So everybody feels aggrieved in a certain way. We all have a backpack of grievances that we carry around, and I think populist leaders are very effective in using that and channeling that for their own political benefit. And there's some interesting work that's been starting to be done on kind of gender equality and those populist discourses, and how also framing, populism always frames the situation as a threat. So, the society is crumbling, the economy is terrible. That's what populist leaders do. And when you frame things like that, gender equality always suffers. So I think it's a very good question. Sure. Allison, please go ahead.
Hi, yes. My name's Allison, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for your panel discussions. It was really wonderful reflecting on some of the amazing progress and areas for continued development. My question, and it was mentioned a little bit, is in the area of sort of women and gender equality in conflict situations, as well as in major displacement and refugee asylum situations. This International Women's Day, as amazing as it is to be here celebrating the long success that we've been working for, at the front of my mind, it's difficult to not think of all of the women, especially in Gaza right now, who are being afflicted to conflict as civilians. So statistics coming out of over 60 women right now dying a day in Gaza. Again, balancing this with recognizing incredible progress, how can we bring, and this is my question, and recognizing it is a difficult question, but I guess bringing these successes and progress that nationally and domestically we can very much reflect on and point to, and sort of bridge this with a bit of lack of acknowledgement of international policy conventions that Ms. Heather Cameron also sort of touched on, that are sort of failing these women and failing people who are falling out of the protection scope of their national countries and domestic countries. Recognizing this is still happening in every country, including Canada, but it's a really, really salient issue for women who are displaced, who are outside of this primary protective zone. And so, yeah, my question is to how to bring some of these areas that we've recognized as progress and some tangible outcomes that were mentioned, and I was taking many notes during the discussion, my hand was flying. So I guess trying to bridge that a little bit with the difficulty of those women who are, similar to the question on Afghanistan, but in conflict and refugee situations, how to bring this progress to those who are often forgotten. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Does anybody want to take a crack at that question? Okay, I can. As a moderator, I'm not supposed to be having an opinion, but you...
And coming, being from Honduras, it's hard for me to answer that question. We have a lot of issues with women. And for example, for the coup, which is a very, very conflictive situation, rapes went up, abuse went up, child pregnancies, of course, because of the rapes, they went up, and women's policies, they were set back. So yeah, starting all over again, like I was saying, it's something that you're always striving to achieve, like integrity. It's the same with human rights. You have to, be trying to achieve it, and work all your life in order to have them, like set in stone, like in France in the Constitution. That has abortion rights incorporated, but I don't know what else I could give you, because you asked a very complicated question.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just thinking a little bit about both questions and just a personal observation. I mean, I'm worried about what's happening to civic space in the context of polarization, and even within my lifetime, you see many of the organizations that used to be there at a community level aren't there, or you see debates over libraries and library books, all of those kind of things, which are incredible examples of polarization into a very local context. But the protection starts locally, and so it worries me a little bit about how these two might be coming together. I'm not an expert in conflict studies or peace building, but the peace that holds that I've seen in Africa have been ones that have been really grounded in community demand for peace and community governance for peace, informal and formal. And so, just the interaction between those two are things that I'm worried about, and I don't know if it speaks directly, but I do think that protective, in so many contexts, there are opportunities to create not just safe havens, but safe access and safe spaces. And so I think that's a lot of work around violence against women, a lot of work around mediation skills and community leadership and empowerment. That's where it comes together, and those assets within the community are assets for peace.
So I'll just use that as an opportunity to conclude. I think one of the things that we're seeing in the world right now is this, geopolitical uncertainty, the rise of conflicts. We know the number of conflicts have gone up. We know the number of deaths in conflicts have gone up. And one of the things that's really struck me about Gaza, of course, is the impact of that conflict on women and children, but also how contested that suffering is. So if we think about what happened on October 7th and the horrific crimes of sexual violence that Hamas committed, we know that that's contested. And if we think about the suffering of Palestinian women and children, we know that that's contested. And so we're not seeing a unifying discourse on protection of civilians. And this is really troubling to me, because In the 1990s, with the Human Security Agenda, we had that kind of elevation of protection. You know, civilians deserve to be protected. And we're seeing an erosion of that norm. We're seeing an erosion of the norms in terms of protection of health facilities. And I also worry that we're not talking about gender equality and women's participation in Gaza. So we're not saying, okay, this is absolutely horrific, but we're going to make sure that we mobilize women's peace movements that exist. They're very strong cross-border women's peace movements. And we're also going to ensure that as we move forward in the reconstruction process, whatever it looks like, we're going to integrate principles of gender equality now. And we're not seeing that, and I think that that's a reflection. Many of my students will know this soapbox. This is a reflection of our national security focus and how we're seeing the world in us versus them. And I think that today, as a, International Women's Day, is a real opportunity for us to reflect on how we need to elevate that, and we need to focus on these universal principles that have been touched on in this panel. So just to conclude, thank you all very much for joining us today. I appreciated and learned so much from this discussion, and I'm sure all of the members of the audience also appreciated very much your insights and sharing your experiences. And I would welcome you to stay for our reception afterwards. And thank you to the audience members for your attention and for your very excellent questions as well. So I hope you enjoy your afternoon, and please join us.